On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, Peter Zeihan discusses why the Port of Savannah is poised for success. I am the aforementioned Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's video. Talking about the Port of Savannah, I am all in, Peter. I love talking about ports in the United States, especially Savannah, which is real close to me. I'm in North Carolina. Savannah's in Georgia. It's one of the fastest growing ports in the United States. Booming container port. I am all for it. However, there's a couple of small factual issues I have with Peter's video, which we're going to take a look at. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's talk about Savannah with Peter.
Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from Savannah, one of my favorite cities in North America.
Right.
And one of the reasons is the bars, and one of the reasons is the restaurants, and the other one, it is home to the largest container port in the continental United States.
Okay, it's home to the largest container terminal in the United States, one single terminal. The Garden Isle terminal in Savannah is the biggest. However, it's not the biggest container port in the United States. That's wrong. LA, Long Beach, New York, New Jersey are all bigger in terms of the number of containers that come into them. So just a slight error there.
Been operating for a few years now. They keep expanding it. You're looking at here one of the Maersk medium-sized ships. The supers do come through here. They just have a problem getting through that bridge there. All right, it's
okay, that's not a Maersk ship. It says MSC on the side. That's actually Mediterranean Shipping Company, which is actually the largest container firm in the world right now. The big restrictions on ships, the size Peter is talking about coming in, is both air draft, getting under bridges, and water depth. Getting in, you got to dredge down to about 50 feet to bring in these big, large container ships.
It's raining. We're going to do the rest of this inside. Sorry, I got waylaid by the client and couldn't do the rest of this one from Savannah, so I'm back home. Two big reasons to be really bullish and really impressed by the Port of Savannah over the years to come. The first has to do with that Jones Act that I keep talking about, the law that says that only American vessels can dock at American ports in succession. So, for example,
okay, that's not what it says, Peter.
If you're in a cargo vessel and you're delivering things to the Chinese coast, the same vessel will go point. But if that same vessel, let's say it's Japanese, was to come to the U.S. West Coast and it stopped in Seattle, it would then have to go back to Vancouver before it could go to San Francisco, then would have to go back to Vancouver before it could go to San Diego.
No, that's not what the Jones Act says. That is not what it says. The Jones Act, Section 27 of the Merchant Marine Act of 1920 says to move cargo from one U.S. port to another U.S. port. In other words, you load it in one U.S. port and you offload it in another U.S. port. You have to be on a U.S. built, U.S. flagged, U.S. crewed, U.S. owned ship. What he just explained right there is not what the Jones Act says at all. So I pulled up the routing for the MSC ship that was in the port that he just saw. This is from Mediterranean Shipping. This is their Emerald line. Shipping companies have these different lines. So this is the Asia to East Coast line. You'll see that the ships will sail from Yantian to Xiamen to Shanghai to Busan, across the Pacific, through the Panama Canal, and then come into the port of Savannah, and then not sail back to Vancouver or go to a foreign port. This is not the Love Boat of the 1970s. It's a whole different issue he's talking about. It's going to go to Jacksonville. It's going to go to Wilmington. Then it's going to go to New York. And then it's going to proceed on. It just can't pick up containers in the port of Savannah and then take those containers and dump them in the port of Wilmington. It can dump containers in Savannah. It can load containers in Savannah. It just can't offload those containers it loaded in Savannah into another U.S. port. That is the Jones Act. Because if you had to only come into one U.S. port and then leave, that would be really ridiculous. And that's not what the Jones Act is. And that's what really triggered me about this video. It's like, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Jones Act is.
As a result, the push for ports is to get bigger and bigger and bigger in order to take these big foreign vessels, and it's crowded out all the smaller American ones.
Okay, this is not the reason for consolidation of ports. Consolidation of ports is economy of scale. So shipping companies want to use bigger container ships because it's more efficient. If you make a ship longer, wider, and deeper, you cube the volume of the ship. You're getting more containers in there for the same crew. It's just pure efficiency, and that means we're seeing the growth of container ports. And what you've seen is the demise of small ports, kind of the diminution of medium-sized ports, and the growth of large ports. In the U.S., it's the four corner strategy. It's L.A. and Long Beach, it's New York, New Jersey, it's Houston, and then it's Savannah. Those are the four big ports you see, one on the West Coast, one on the Gulf Coast, two on the East Coast.
And because the infrastructure required to do that requires a large chunk of land, and most American cities don't have a lot of port capacity. Instead, what you get are shuttle ships, where you'll take a big vessel into a place like Kingston, Jamaica, and the cargo will be relocated onto a lot of, again, foreign vessels that will then go directly to Miami or go directly to Charleston or go directly to New York. And as a result, the Jones Laws has just completely hollowed out the American maritime space.
Okay, that's not why the American maritime space has been hollowed out, number one. So what he's talking about is going into large kind of big ports and then go into smaller feeder ships, which is true in some areas, especially in Asia. If you go in and around Asia, you see these small feeder ships doing that. But one of the things that you're building Neo-Panamax vessels to use the new lane of the Panama Canal is so that you can load 16,000 containers onto one big ship, sell it from Asia. And in the past, you would have to go to Kingston to do that because you were only carrying 4,000, 5,000 containers to use the old lane of the Panama Canal. But now you could put 16,000 on and go through. Now, granted, right now we have water issues in the Panama Canal that's restricting that. But that is the purpose for doing that. The thing that undercuts U.S. maritime regarding coastal shipping and the Jones Act is the invention and the introduction of the interstate pipeline system, the interstate highway system in the 50s and 60s. And then the idea of using feeder ships to move cargo between U.S. ports. U.S. ports are getting bigger, they're getting consolidated, but U.S. ports are also inefficient. They're also very expensive to use, and it takes a lot of time and delay to offload and load containers in a port. What makes Savannah so appealing? He talked about the lack of land. LA Long Beach, the container terminal isn't growing. New York, New Jersey, container terminal is not growing. Savannah is, because in Georgia, you have all the things you need to grow a container port. You've dredged, you've got the air draft, you've got the water draft, and you've got huge, massive amounts of land that are available to expand your container terminal. You're close to a railway, you're close to a highway, you're close to an airport. You've got very pro-government for labor and working restrictions in the Port of Savannah. Savannah really has all the elements that you need for. If you want to go further on that, head on over to Port Economics Management and Policy. This is a case study done by Dr. Jean-Paul Rodrigue, the Port of Savannah Logistics Cluster. It's great. It talks about why Savannah has all those attributes to really become a major port and grow substantially in the years to come.
Savannah is the first location in the United States since 1920 to manage to build a super container port.
Okay. Okay. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I am the most imperfect person you'll ever meet. The number of mistakes I've made in my videos, if you go back and look at them, are tremendous. But quick little fact here. 1920, that is the year the Jones Act comes into place, the Merchant Marine Act. Containerization is not created until 1956 with Malcolm McLean. You don't really get container ports in the United States until the 1970s. And we've actually built a lot of container ports in the United States. Again, I'll keep talking about LA, Long Beach, New York, New Jersey, and Houston, but Jacksonville, Charleston, Baltimore, Boston, there's a lot out there. Norfolk. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. This is what makes Savannah different is the scope and size. It's tremendous. It's huge, and the growth is amazing to watch.
It's upriver a bit, but the biggest vessels, some of the biggest vessels in the world, go there regularly. You saw the one that was coming through. That was actually a fairly small one, but it's
okay. We got to what's small, what's large. Let's be clear. In the United States, you do not get the ultra large container vessels in. These are Ever Given, Ever a Lot, the big, huge 20 to 24,000 TEU vessels. And that's largely for very specific reasons. We don't have the cranes to do it because you would need a crane that can go across 20 to 24 container stacks. A good measurement for containers ships is however how many thousand of containers it has. That's about how many stacks it has across how wide it is. We handle neo-Panamax vessels, largely vessels from 15 to 18,000 TEU. Those tend to be about the biggest that you can bring in. Small, again, small is out the window when it comes to container ships. What had been a good sized container ship 20 years ago, Maersk threw out the window with the introduction of the E class and the triple E class, and now it's just craziness on how big they can. The big issue is going through the Neo Panamax lane of the Panama Canal, about 16 to 17,000 TEU.
It's the only place in the continental United States can actually take these vessels all at once, with the exception of maybe Long Beach.
I'm not sure why he's saying Long Beach with that. I mean, because the size of ships that go into goes into Savannah can go in other places. Charleston just dredged down to I think the deepest draft on the East Coast. Jacksonville has dredged down. New York, New Jersey raised the friggin' Bayonne Bridge so they can bring these ships in there. LA can take the ships as big as Long Beach can take it. So there's really no issue here that really prevents just Savannah and Long Beach from taking these container ships.
Other places tend to do more mix of business. So, for example, the Tacoma port does take fairly large containers, but it's also a major export point for commodities coming out of the intermountain interior of eastern Washington and Oregon.
So that is true. I mean, if you look at Baltimore, a very mixed port coming in. If you look at Long Beach, for example, Long Beach doesn't just do containers. They do bulk material. They have oil tankers. They do passenger liners. LA does the same thing too, by the way, with containers and passenger ships. New York, New Jersey is largely containers coming in and out of them. So several ports will basically focus them in. What makes Savannah really interesting as a port, bud, is the number of exports that come out of Savannah. Whereas if you look at exports coming out of LA and Long Beach, about for every one export container, about 2 to 3 empties go out. That's not the case in Savannah. Savannah's like one of the leads. I think it was number 3 this past month in terms of export containers coming out of the United States.
Anywho, bottom line is as long as we have these very, very large container ships, which are the norm for international trade right now, Savannah is really the only place in the United States that can take them on the East Coast.
Again, New York, New Jersey can take these vessels. There are other ports that can take them. What makes Savannah different is it has the kind of the coordination, or excuse me, the geography of having a major highway, a major railway, an airport all together right there really makes it conducive for it. And it's got land for development of not just the container terminal, but distribution and warehouse sites.
At all. New Jersey just isn't up to snuff in that regard. So that's issue number one. Issue number two, if we're moving to a deglobalized period, we're going to have a lot of different patterns here, and our interactions with the Mexicans are going to become much, 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 much more robust. Now, there are some limitations on the infrastructure between Texas and Mexico that do a decent job of integrating the northern tier of states, but half of the population of Mexico is in the greater Mexico City area. And if we're going to have the expansion industrial plant that we need in North America in order to deal with the post-Chinese environment, we're going to have to metabolize a lot of what is in central Mexico. Now, there are 2 ways you can do this. The first one is to build a really robust multimodal roads and rail system going from the border all the way down into the Mexico City core. We should definitely do that. The second one,
it's really expensive too, by the way. We were seeing the development on the west coast of Mexico of some key terminals, container terminals, and using the railway system that's now partnered up with the Kansas City Southern Railway. And so we're seeing that being done.
Is to turn Veracruz once again into a very, very large port so that product from Mexican City core can go down to Veracruz, get on a vessel, and then come up to the United States. Now, you can do that in one of 2 ways as well. You can use small shuttle tankers that go to places like Houston or New Orleans or Miami, or if you're more interested in the Eastern Seaboard, you just put it on a mega ship and you put it in Savannah.
that assumes you're going to have enough cargo to put on a mega ship. If you 17,000 containers is a lot of containers. I'm not sure what's coming out of central Mexico that you need to ship up there. But that means you have to invest in the port of Veracruz. That means dredging. That means container cranes. That's a lot of work to go into Veracruz.
So it doesn't really matter which path we're on here or how smart or how dumb we are in taking advantage of the changing world around us. Savannah's got the hardware in place for really any possible scenario here. And so the ships are going to keep coming. And so am I.
So, an interesting video by Peter. Again, I just don't quite understand the misconceptions on the Jones Act. And let me be clear, shipping is it's a sea of murk. It really is. It's the muddiest thing in the world. It is hard to understand the rules and regulations, especially about some of the laws and how they operate. But if you're going to make statements about it, you got to be really sure, that you have that correct. And that was a bit of a misstatement on that part, and hence the reason for the video here. But I do think Port of Savannah is one of those places you should be watching because it is a growing port. It's amazing the growth we've seen in that port. It's estimated to almost double in its container capacity over the next few years. It's really interesting to watch. And if you get to Savannah, you're down on the waterfront right there. The port is upriver from the ocean, so the ships come right past downtown Savannah. It's really amazing to watch them come by. So if you get an opportunity to do it, take a visit down to the beautiful Port of Savannah. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a big thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you can hit the super thanks button down below or become a member of the Patreon group. Become a patron of the page. You can support the page with either yearly or monthly subscriptions. Until the next episode, this is Sal, signing off.